connect. Oh, yes, it has. Good. We are live. It's always wonderful when technology actually works and you get connected to the interweb in order to do these interviews. I'm going to be speaking to David Marron in a minute. This is Graham Coath with another My Music. I hope you're going to enjoy half an hour or so of us talking music this afternoon. If you're listening on Spotify after the event, hope you're having a good time wherever you are, probably driving down the motorway or something like that. Don't crash. Before we go any further, though, a little word from our sponsor, Nextdown, who, thank you very much to them, makes this happen all the time.
I need to get going, Mel. See you later.
Good afternoon, David.
Good afternoon, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm fine. Just a little bit of word about sponsorship. It's quite interesting because I've had people before now go, "Oh, you've got a sponsor," which means, you know, and people assume that you make loads of money out of having a sponsor. Actually, no. All it means is that I can afford to do it. Thanks to Nextdown for doing that and actually supporting artists coming on and talking about their music. But the reality is that you know, nobody in this life is full of money. You know, we're not in the sort of realms of Radio 1 or anything like that. And similarly, most of the artists that come on aren't making the same sort of money as Ed Sheeran. So you know, I think we're all kind of grateful for whatever exposure we can get in order just to keep talking about music. What's your life in music been like? So when did it start?
It's been great. It's been, I suppose, since about the age of 15 or 16, I think, when I first started playing guitar. But it's been brilliant. It's been a way to kind of introduce myself to new people and to meet new people and to have new experiences. It's been very rewarding, and not just in a social context. I think as a form of therapy, it's always been brilliant. I can always rely on music, whether it's creating it or listening to it. I find even my collection of albums from over the years, they feel like friends, if you know what I mean. They've been through a lot of the same stuff that I have been, and yeah, it's great. You're never alone, I think, when you have music.
No, some people don't get it, do they? I mean, there's a lot of people that do get it, and there'll be a lot of people listening to this that, you know, really understand exactly what you're talking about. But there are other people that don't, and I've talked a little bit about that before on this program. But there are some people that just hear music as muzak in a way. It's just this stuff that exists in the background, and you know, they quite like it when something comes on the radio and it's, yeah, okay, no, that's fine. It whiles away a bit of time, but it's not a friend to them like it is to some people.
Sure. Yeah, I get that, because I suppose maybe it's not music for some people. Maybe their passions lie elsewhere and they find comfort in, be it the visual arts or TV or movies, or even in just friendships and families. So I suppose it is a matter of each to their own. But I think when you do find that something that you can rely on and you can totally immerse yourself in it, yeah, the rewards go on forever, I think.
And has that had some kind of impact on the name of this project as well?
Friendmaker came about. It was actually, I was still in my old band, Sanskrit, and Friendmaker was originally set up as a solo project, just something to kind of explore slightly different types of music than what I was playing with the band. And then when that band kind of dissolved, yeah, Friendmaker became more of a serious project for me, and that has developed. And I suppose the name, in very, very simple terms, I wanted something that was easy to remember, easy to spell, easy to Google, but also the idea of it being starting as a solo project and it been becoming more collaborative, almost like a collective, and to never shy away from playing with new musicians. And even it meant that there was no boundaries for me either. It was starting off with me on an acoustic guitar or piano and singing, and then it allows me, I suppose, I can go in an electronic direction, I can go in a jazz direction, but kind of allow myself to experiment with lots of different music and musicians. So I think, Friendmaker kind of made sense from that. And there's not. I've been in bands before where the name is incredibly hard to remember or to spell. So I've learned my lesson. Keep it simple.
Well, no, it absolutely works. But as you say, in a way, quite an unusual name for a solo project.
Yeah, and I think I enjoy the ambiguity of the name, where you're not sure, is it a solo project, is it a collective, is it a proper band? And again, that ambiguity kind of lent itself to me not knowing where I wanted the project to go. It was, let's get a name, let's start writing and recording and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's beautiful, David. If you start a solo project, especially if you came out of a band, etc., if you called it your name, you immediately lump a huge amount of pressure on your own shoulders as well, don't you?
You do, and I think I've always found that even on stage or whatever, it's a version of me that's up there, and the same with releasing stuff. So I think by just having my own name immediately attached to what I'm doing, there's a lot of responsibility with that, and there's a lot of attachment. And I think I felt more comfortable with, I suppose I can explore different versions of myself by kind of having a pseudonym rather than using my own name. And also, I think for good or for bad, I think sometimes when people use their own name, that you're almost pigeonholed as a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar, a troubadour, straight away, people can't see past that. And I think that can kind of challenge or limit what you can do or the opportunities that you might get. So that made sense for me.
Just as a little aside before we go back into the serious talk, but what's the worst pseudonym you've ever come across in terms of a musician? There must be some.
I don't know. Like when I think about it, like a lot of my favorite bands in the 90s, actually, when you really think about it, they had terrible names. Like Smashing Pumpkins is probably a terrible name, as is Pearl Jam, or when you read, like, we're so used to hearing them and they're synonymous with these famous bands, and we don't think of them anymore as strange names. But to see them written down on the page and to know nothing about them, for somebody new to them, to go, this is a ridiculous name. So I don't think a name is that important. If you're willing to put in the hard work and you're true to yourself and you create something meaningful, I think people will see beyond that. There's friends of mine in a band here in Ireland called Ham Sandwich. Yeah. And they are
Wet Leg. Wet
Leg is another really good example as well. Yeah. So I think it doesn't really matter after that. You can just, people see past the name. And I think even going back to that band, Ham Sandwich, fantastic band. But I remember Bono, there was a quote attributed to him early in their career saying they really should change their name, but they didn't. And I think they enjoyed the challenge of, we're going to have to make very good music to get past this, and so they enjoyed that.
Well, they were the Prunes first, so I mean they did actually come up with something that was perhaps a little bit more digestible with you two. The worst one that I ever came across, just to let you know, was there was actually a guy that was on the circuit at one point called Joe King.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's like when I've had an illegal copy of Photoshop some years ago. I put in a name, something like that.
Yeah. And his first album was actually called You Must Be Joe King.
Wow.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
So I don't, if anyone wants to steal that has already been done. I can't imagine for any minute that anyone would do that. So when did you first think music, not just from a listening side of things, but from a writing sort of thing, was for you?
I think probably in secondary school when I was 13 or 14, and I think it was it was concurrent with, say, in English class when we got to do creative writing or compositions and essays and things like that. And the excitement of when you were, say, given a subject matter to write about, or an opening line, and you had to go from there. And at the same time, I would have been learning music. I was obsessed with bands like Nirvana, I suppose, when I was 14 or 15. And so all of those things coming together, and the idea, the excitement of a blank page, and to be able to go, this is cool, I can do whatever I want, and there's no limits to this. And just, yeah, that was very exciting. I think as a teenager, that's probably one of the most exciting things, is that there are no limitations. Like, I can really be who I want to be, and seeing other people doing that and knowing that it's okay to do that and to be that.
Yeah. Do you feel that's missing these days with youngsters starting up in music?
It's funny, I had a conversation with a friend at the weekend, and we talked about how in our own town we can't think of any drummers under the age of 30, for example. And so, like, yeah, I suppose there is an immediate concern there that, like, is there another generation of hungry musicians coming along? And I don't know, like, perhaps people are just expressing themselves in different ways, or maybe people are very much behind closed doors, because I think socially things are different. Like, I can't imagine what it'd be like being a teenager in the last 2 or 3 years, where we were all locked up away in our rooms, and so many of those formative moments that they missed out on. And so maybe a lot of younger people just haven't had an opportunity, or they don't have the confidence to say to a friend, come on, let's get together, let's jam, let's see what we can do.
Well, yeah, it's that aspect of it. I mean, it's I mean, I've got 5 children, and the oldest is just finishing university, etc. But a few times on this program, when I've spoken to musicians that grew up in the same sort of period as me, etc., you know, we've all said the same thing. When we started, we just started because we wanted to. And it was just fun, and you just sort of, you know, got together with a group of friends, and it was partly a social thing. It was partly like, you know, we saw the magic of music, but it didn't really matter whether you were great at it or not. It was more a case of we just wanted to give it a go. I think so. And I think there's this thing now where it's almost like with a youngster, you know, they kind of almost realize you've got to be good. And you wonder whether that then stops them actually going for it in the first place, because, you know, you've got to be good, and you've got to be professional, and you've got to do it this way, and you've got to look that way, and you've got to, you know, you've got to market yourself. And it's,
I think there's probably a huge pressure on young people when so much of their intake or communication with friends is so heavily curated through social media or whatever, that you're putting this version of yourself forward every day, and you see other people, other friends doing it to an incredibly professional standard. So I suppose if you're taking that ethos to other parts of your life, it must be difficult and scary to put yourself out there, even as a musician. So perhaps there are a lot of bedroom musicians that are working on stuff that they're kind of, I'm not going to put this out until it's perfect, because that is the attitude they've grown up with. So yeah, look, maybe things are just done in a slightly different way now. I can't say for sure if it's good or bad. I think there's so many amazing young artists releasing stuff right now, so somebody's doing something right. So
absolutely. I think there's a lot of great music from young people, but I do think that there may be more of a pressure in terms of, as you say, getting it right in the first place, and perhaps being a little bit more precious about it. Did you learn by your mistakes?
I don't know. I keep making mistakes, but
mistakes are good, right, in music, in a way.
Absolutely. I think it's very important. I think you learn a lot about yourself, and I don't know. Like, I've always done this thing where I look back at the version of me from 2 or 3 years ago, saying, "Oh, I was so crap," or you know, I can't believe I released that or did that. But I think if you do that forever, you're going to you're going to hit some very interesting ground along the way. And I suppose when I was younger, when I didn't know as much music, say, as I do now, there was always a chance of you narrowed down yourself in terms of genre at that point, and you could hear your influences very clearly because you're only listening to your favorite 5 or 10 bands or whatever. And that's one thing I found as I got older. It's the melting pot of maybe your 100 favorite bands that you listen to all the time, and there's little moments that inspire what you do, and it's harder for someone who's listening to say, oh, I hear where they're coming from. It's directly from there or there. And I think that is the kind of standing on the shoulders of giants thing, of where when you use so many different influences that you do start breaking new ground and you accidentally find something original as you go.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's part of it as well. I wonder whether that's actually part of an issue for all of us, is that there is more music out there in a way. We've got access now to absolutely everything because it's there on a hockey puck.
Yeah.
Whereas once upon a time, in order to, yes, there was curated music on radio, etc., and you hoped that you'd listen to something new, and there were people like Peel out there that were pushing boundaries, and Kershaw and people like that. But ultimately, if you wanted to listen to something again and again and again, or you wanted to explore something, you had to buy it.
Yeah.
Or you had to go around your mate's house and delve through their record collection and listen to it that way. It wasn't that you could just go a bit of that and a bit of this and a bit of the other. So in a way, we've got access to so much music. Does that dilute the belly, if you like, in terms of, do you know what, I want to sound like them? I think when we first started, there were probably a couple of bands that we were really into, and that's who we wanted to be a bit like. That was our vision, if you were. Then you started playing, you realize you can sound nothing like your favorite band, and you find your own thing. But there was that kind of underbelly of, we really want to sound like that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's too much these days.
Possibly, yeah. I wonder if it's perhaps the same conversations are happening where you're hanging out with your friends, you say, have you heard this band? You should go and listen to them, and you're sending them on a Spotify link or whatever. So yeah, maybe the same communities exist, but it does seem like there could be a risk of oversaturation. There's just so much music to access that it's hard to know, what to fall in love with.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I've still fallen in love with some of the bands that I was listening to when I was 14, and some of them are still going, which is absolutely great. Maybe that's a great thing. Is that some of these people can continue to keep going these days, because whereas before they wouldn't have been able to, now they can. Now you can have a, maybe not. Maybe there's not the money in the industry for most people like there used to be, but you can certainly, if you do things right, you can have a long career in music, because you can, if you get a group of people that really love what you're doing, you can keep in touch with them. So there's swings and roundabouts about this.
Definitely, and I think, as you said there, the longevity of bands now. Like, I remember, say, a band like the Pixies, for example. I would have discovered them in my teens after the fact. They had officially or unofficially split up in whatever, 92, 93. And so I thought I'd never get to see them again. Their discography was barely available. It was out of print. You were relying on getting it from friends, or you'd find it in a bargain basement basket somewhere. And I suppose when they came back, whatever, around, I don't know, 2001, 2002, there was a whole new audience, and with streaming and more availability of music online, it meant there was an entire new generation discovering them. So yeah, I think for examples like that, it has been very positive that it does breathe new life into bands like that. And look at, I suppose nobody are fans of when bands come back for the wrong reasons, but we've seen, I suppose, with the Pixies that they've come back and they've written new material, and I think that has gotten better along the way. So it's been positive all around from a fan's point of view, but also for the bands themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What were you listening to as a teenager then? You mentioned the Pixies. You mentioned Nirvana. Was there any oddities? Were there any things that you picked up on that perhaps no one's ever heard of?
I suppose there was a lot of Irish bands.
Right.
Whipping Boy would have been a big one. My Bloody Valentine, bands like Ash, Kerb Dog. There were fairly well-known rock bands, I suppose, in this part of the world, but not necessarily worldwide. So there would have been a lot of stuff like that we would have listened to. Outside of that, I think Smashing Pumpkins would have been a big influence on us at the time. And then, I suppose, coming out of my teen years, going into stuff like Radiohead were a game changer, big time for me and most of my friends and musicians that I know. They're like, "Oh wow, you're allowed to do that with music."
Are you allowed to mess around with your own formula? I think that's the thing with someone like Radiohead. It was that more than anything, wasn't it? It was the fact that they had a formula. It was successful. They then broke it down.
Yeah,
I mean, in a way, it was quite Beatlesque, you know.
Yeah, I think it was. It must have been terrifying for the people around them, not for them as a band, because it must have been really exciting for them, but for
A&R people. And
yeah, absolutely. But I they've proven themselves over the years that they can completely change things up with every album, and that was really exciting for an emerging musician like myself, going, so there is no rule book. You can do it differently every time. You don't have to stick to a specific genre for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So even down to the way it was released, you know,
big time. Yeah. The In Rainbows thing where you could pay what you want. Groundbreaking stuff and interesting. I don't know if it was necessarily a right or the wrong thing to do, but it was. They've never left us thinking that they're being formulaic by any stretch of the imagination.
It may have worked slightly better than putting your album on an iPod, whether everyone wanted it or not, which might not have been the best idea that you two ever had. But but they tried. You know, that's the thing. Again, you know, I think everybody at that time was struggling to see where the industry was going to go, you know, as we moved away from physical format towards more and more streaming. People just had to try something, right? You know,
absolutely, yeah. It was a strange time that I remember. I think just before the Arctic Monkeys released their debut album, I remember demos of theirs, Boardwalk and different songs like that. Kind of people would say, you know, here's a link to, I think it was like LimeWire and things like that at the time. Yeah. And, you know, you were just hearing little snapshots of what was going to be coming. And like people kind of had stopped buying CDs at that point. Vinyl hadn't made its comeback. You were downloading music, but there was certainly very little paying for downloaded music. Streaming platforms weren't really set up. It was such a mess. And I remember, like, even my old band Sanskrit, we released an album in about 2008, and it was still very much like that. We didn't know, you know, it was released on CD, but streaming was starting to happen, and you were really just lost in the mix of, you didn't know what format to put your music out in. So I think that's kind of, it's good now that, well, whether or not we all love streaming platforms and the rate that actually goes back to the artist, at least we can use streaming platforms as a way to promote music and then release something physical on vinyl or whatever.
I love that whole period. I love the fact that everybody was trying to second guess what was going to come next. I remember sort of mini discs coming out and everyone thinking they were going to be the next big thing. And then I remember an article in the now defunct and gone forever, sadly, Q magazine, where someone was talking about the fact that we were all going to walk into shops with a little disc or a little chip. And basically, you know, go up to the counter and go, I want that, and that on that chip. And then they put it on there for you, pay for your album of, you know, selected tracks, and then walk back out with your chip and stick it in the machine. And that would be,
yeah,
that would be the future. The fact that no one thought, oh, they're going to actually put it in the air.
I know. Yeah, the cloud.
You know, well, that's because we all grew up with internet that went, and took forever, you know, so
true.
we never expected this, you know, to be able to turn our computer on, press a button and go and see something instantly. We never expected that to happen.
No.
And yet it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. What streaming platforms have been incredibly valuable, especially for me. Such a limited musical education. So I've been catching up. I mean, that's what's great about it. You can say to somebody, check this out, boom, boom, boom. And, you know, back in the day, you had to beg, borrow, steal somebody's albums, you know.
Yeah.
I promise I'll return them in good nick.
Yeah. And like that was a big thing. Like when you'd hear people talking about specific bands that were still quite obscure and difficult to get. I'm thinking of like krautrock stuff like Can or something like that. And somebody say, you have to go and listen to this. Like, for example, would be gigging and someone say, oh, that reminded me of Can. And you're like, oh, cool. Where can I hear them? And they're like, nowhere. You're not gonna buy it in Ireland, like. So that's one thing about streaming is that you really can go back and do your homework and listen to more obscure stuff from way before any of us were born, which is brilliant. That's very exciting. And yeah, I'm still finding new stuff today, and yeah, taking inspiration from stuff back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Well, let's bring us full circle to today. So you're releasing You, Me, and Everything Else.
Yeah, You, Me, and Everything Else. It's the current single, and so it's on streaming platforms, and there is the music video for it is on YouTube. And in a couple of weeks' time, we have the second single from the debut album. The second single is called Weird, and it's out on the 21st of April. So yes, the first two pieces of material from the forthcoming album.
And the first is you know quite acoustic in its nature. Is Weird similar to that, or
Weird is more along the lines of indie rock. It's 3 minutes, verse, chorus, bridge, double chorus, gone.
In the face.
In the face, yeah. So we were kind of very conscious of the fact that we wanted to show two very different sides of ourselves at the beginning, and not to kind of get pigeonholed too early. So I think with the first two singles, I think we've made the right decision, and there's some equally weird stuff coming down the line as well. So
great.
So yeah, can't wait for people to hear it, and the response has been great so far to our first single.
That's brilliant. So it's the whole album in the can, as it were.
I would say we're maybe 60% there.
Right.
There's everything has been demoed or started recording in some way. So I've at this stage, I think there was 15 or 16 songs recorded. That's been whittled down to maybe 12. So I have a fair idea of what's going to be going on the album, but some of those songs are still at a very early stage in terms of their proper studio recording.
Yeah. And in terms of studio, are you using the same studio to record all of this, or?
I kind of record most of it here in my own studio, and then my mixing engineer, Darren, he will record a lot of my vocals separately in his studio. And then there's a separate mastering engineer from that. So yeah, I kind of have a formula in place that's working for me right now. The difficulty during lockdowns and that is that the 5 people in the band, we were meeting up at, it was very difficult to just meet up and jam as a band. So it was very much individually coming into the studio and people doing their own takes. So that was a challenge, but it was kind of good as well, because it allowed the songs room to breathe and would be kind of sending over and back demos to each other saying this is where it's at now, and coming up with ideas from there. So that has been great. And I think even doing demos of vocals and stuff like that and having our own studio, and myself and Molly, who also sings in the band, the comfort of being able to record at home and to experiment and try out new things has been brilliant. So
I think
been
for a
good.
lot of bands, it's been quite productive in a way. I mean, in terms of, I think it's almost forced a good work ethic on a lot of musicians, that, you know, we've got to actually get this done like this, you know, whereas, you know, years ago you just go into a recording studio and you spend some of that time writing the songs, you know.
Yeah, and in the past we would have spent a lot of money, like, as an up and coming band. You'd be saving every penny you had to go into a studio, and that was huge pressure. Huge pressure even just to communicate your ideas to an engineer or a producer, and in the hopes that they will get what you're about. So I think in all of those processes, you were losing maybe 20% of your integrity, so to speak, you know, of what you were aiming for. So that has been good. Certainly, yeah, the breathing space, the conversations about where you want the music to go, but also just as a necessity, the importance of to be able to be creative when we were all in lockdown was just amazing. Like, it was just so important for mental health and things like that as well, to be productive and to be active and doing something interesting. So yeah, it was.
And then you get the joy, sir, of, you know, at some point being able to get together and actually play these songs.
Absolutely, and that's brilliant. I can't wait. Like, we're in the summertime, we're going to get some proper time to jam all of these songs out properly and to kind of put together a stage show. And I've been doing little bits of gigging with some other bands that I play with, and it's just been brilliant being back on a stage as well. And yeah, you can't beat that feeling of just 4 or 5 of your mates in a room playing music together. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that.
That's a magic feeling. That is a magic feeling which never goes away. David, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Thanks so much for sharing something of your life in music. If people want to get hold of the latest single and of course subsequent singles and the album, where's the best place to go?
Friendmakermusic.com. And yeah, we're on Spotify and YouTube. The current single is called You, Me, and Everything Else, and the next single is called Weird, which is out on April 21st.
Brilliant. David, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Bye for now.
Cheers.